I was home alone, but the terrifying voices in the dark turned my safe space into a nightmare. I never should have opened that door. I should have known better. The hushed whispers crept through the shadows, slithering like a snake in my mind. My heart raced as I stood in the dim light of my living room, just a few hours ago, wrapped in the comfort of my favorite blanket, the soft glow of the TV illuminating the space. How could a place that felt so safe suddenly twist into something horrific? The air turned cold, wrapping around me like ice. I could hear the ticking of the clock, every second stretching into eternity, and then, faint voices brushing through the silence. They weren't my own. The kind of voices that could chill the blood, whispering secrets meant for someone else. I glanced at the door leading to the basement. I always heard things from down there, strange creaks, low murmurs like a gathering of unseen souls. That I jumped at every little noise. The clatter of my cat tapping around in her litter box, the wind rattling the window frames. It all felt wrong. The shadows danced on the walls, flitting in and out like mischievous phantoms. My skin prickled, each hair standing on end, as I felt a deep-seated fear take root in my gut. I crept through the house, listening, my breath shallow and ragged. I felt like an intruder in my own home. The whispers grew louder, the air heavy with dread. I spun around, half expecting someone or something to emerge from the darkness. A loud thump echoed from the basement, shaking me to the core. What was down there? My chest tightened as I fought back the urge to scream, my feet glued to the floor. I could almost hear my heartbeat in my ears, like a drum warning me to run. But where? Out of my home. Away from the voices. Then, I saw it, a shadow moving across the wall, darting towards me. It froze as I locked eyes with it, a lurking figure that seemed to smile at me in the dark. My breath caught in my throat, and all I could do was stare. Suddenly, a door slammed somewhere in the house, the sound ringing like a gunshot. Panic surged through me. I was not alone anymore. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding like a war drum in the stillness that followed the door's violent thud. Shadows spiraled around me, taunting me with the prospect that some unseen force hunted just out of sight. I wanted to scream, to call out for help, but the words took flight before they could manifest into sound. Instead, I stood paralyzed, my body betraying my desperate need to flee. That a cold gust whipped past me, and the scent of earth and decay filled the air. I sucked in a breath, choking on the acrid taste of dust and fear. The whispers returned, now like a chant, echoing from the depths of the basement, a haunting refrain that beckoned me. Come closer, come closer. With a jolt, I tore my gaze from the shadows and pressed my back against the wall, my mind racing. The window was an exit, but would I survive whatever was lurking behind me? As paranoia clawed at my sanity, I caught a glimpse of movement around the corner of my vision, a figure, something slender and elongated, inching ever so softly along the floor. Despair washed over me, and I felt like a moth drawn to flame, compelled to approach the unknown. Moving mechanically, my feet dragged me toward the basement door, and with each creak of the aged wood, dread seeped deeper into my bones. The voices intensified, gliding into a manic frenzy, tearing apart the silence that had filled the home moments before. There was a rhythm to their sound, a pulsing wave of incoherence that rocked my very essence. Tentatively, I reached for the knob, my fingers trembling as I turned it slowly, each click echoing in the space between breaths. I prepared for whatever would greet me, a maelstrom of uncertain realities swirling in my mind. The door creaked open, revealing dark steps leading into nothingness, the light from the living room unable to penetrate the depths below. Suddenly, the whispering stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence that screamed for release. I hesitated on the threshold, heart racing, caught between the allure of the abyss and the instinct to retreat. But something thrummed beneath me, an almost magnetic pull, urging me forward that I took a step down, then another, driven by a nauseating mixture of terror and curiosity. The ground felt damp beneath my bare feet, as if the very foundation wept with memories I was not meant to witness. At the bottom of the stairs, the temperature plummeted, sending shivers cascading across my skin, and there was again a faint light flickering at the back of the basement, casting long shadows that twisted and warped with each heartbeat. The air thickened, and I could feel a presence. It was suffocating, an entity waiting just beyond the veil of light, hiding where only the brave or foolish dared to tread. As I edged closer, the flickering revealed an old mirror standing against the wall, dusty and cracked. But it wasn't my reflection that met me, it was the figure I had seen slinking in the shadows. It stood behind me, its face a blend of features that seemed to mesh together, as if stitched from the remnants of nightmares. Its mouth moved, but the words were lost in the chaos that swirled within my mind. I stumbled back, a blood-curdling scream clawing to escape, but before I could utter a sound, the mirror began to emit a low hum, resonating deep within my bones. And then it happened, a rush of frigid air enveloped me, and I was pulled toward the mirror, my own body seeming to fade away, as if being sucked into a void. "Help me," whispered a voice from the depths, and for a fleeting moment, I felt connected, not just to the entity but to something deeper, a shared terror, a plea for salvation. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was that twisted face behind me, grinning wider, as if it had finally caught its prey, and then, nothing, the basement fell silent once more. I gasped, lungs burning, as I broke through the surface of an icy void. The sensation was akin to surfacing from deep water, where reality twisted and flowed like quicksilver. Shadows danced in the periphery of my vision, evading my grasp even as I strained to focus. Panic surged within me as I grappled with the profound silence that enveloped me. Where was I? My surroundings were an endless expanse of darkness, each heartbeat echoing like a clock ticking down to oblivion. The mirror was gone, along with the horrifying visage that had terrorized me moments before. In its place, an oppressive weight pressed down on me, squeezing the air from my chest. I tried to call out, but my voice echoed back as a mere whisper, lost in this vast, unyielding blackness. The suffocating stillness was interrupted by soft, sibilant whispers, voices that slid between syllables like snakes through grass. "Come play with us," they beckoned, their tones thick with unrestrained malice. I struggled to discern their origins, but every direction I turned yielded only more darkness. The sense that something unseen circled me heightened my dread. Then, out of the void, silhouettes began to emerge like smoke coiling from a dying fire. They were children, faces pale and twisted, eyes devoid of light but brimming with a dread familiarity. Each one wore a look of desperation, mouth stretching into wide, distorted grins that chilled my very soul. One stepped forward, and I recognized the faded blue dress, the familiar curls framing a face that belonged to my sister Lucy, who had gone missing years ago. "Help us," she said, her voice a mere echo of the laughter that had once danced through our home. "We want to go home." My heart clenched, a tear forming as the flood of memories rushed back the day Lucy vanished without a trace while playing hide-and-seek in our yard, her laughter gradually dimming into silence. I reached for her, desperate to embrace her, but as my fingers curled around the air, she slipped from my grasp, the shadows consuming her as they twirled in a sinister ballet. "Lucy!" I shouted, panic gnawing at my insides. "Where are you?" "Join us in the game," hissed another child, their head tilting at an unnatural angle. "Playtime never ends here." The whispers grew in volume, warping into a cacophony that rattled through my bones. The sensation of a cold hand brushed against my back, sending an electric jolt of terror through me. I spun to face it, a figure with features dissolved in shadow and chaos, a grotesque parody of a human shape that twisted and undulated like a reflection on the brink of breaking. The thing leaned close, its breath frigid against my skin, and I could see thousands of eyes glimmering within the darkness, all watching, all waiting. "You're one of us now," it growled, each word dripping with malice. "Welcome to the lost." Just then, a bright light flickered in the distance, illuminating their faces momentarily. Hope surged through me. Perhaps I was still in the basement, still fighting to escape the clutches of whatever dark magic bound me. I stumbled toward the light, heart racing, determination igniting my resolve to break free from this nightmare, but the children surged forward, a wave of pale limbs and gnarled fingers grasping at me, yearning for something I could not comprehend. No. I pleaded, thrashing against the onslaught. I don't want to stay here. We are home. They chorused, their voices melding into a unified chant that clawed at my mind. Just as I burst into the light, I felt the sharp grip of those tiny hands close around my wrists, yanking me back into the abyss lurking just outside the radiance. I screamed, my throat raw and aching, and in that moment, the light flickered again, dimming perilously. Shadows surged like a tidal wave, retreating into the recesses of darkness, as if hungry, desperate to drag me under. In a final act of defiance, I closed my eyes and leaped into the brightness. But as I collided with the warmth of its embrace, something yanked me back violently, and I was torn from the light, falling into a swollen darkness that enveloped me. And then, everything disappeared except for the sound of Lucy's laughter, echoing like a death knell, as I plunged deeper into the terrifying unknown. Suddenly, I landed not on the cold floor of the basement, but on something soft and pulsating beneath me, as if the very earth was alive. And in that instant, I opened my eyes to see all the children gathered around me, their hollow eyes fixed on my sprawled form, smiles widening once more. "Welcome to our home," they chorused in unison, their mirth spiraling into otherworldly laughter that echoed endlessly, as the floor beneath me began to shift and swirl like the tide, and my scream faded into the darkness that followed. I jolted upright, surrounded by that pulsating, living ground. My breath came in quick gasps. The children loomed above me, their faces twitching with manic delight. It was as if the air had thickened, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud, and I barely comprehended the new horrors unraveling around me. The cavernous space was no longer just a void but an otherworldly landscape of distorted proportions and swirling shadows. I could see children's figures, endless and warped, stretching back into the blackness behind them, merging with the swirling chaos that seemed intent on swallowing us whole. The playfulness that radiated from them transformed, becoming malignant, grating, clawing at my sanity. "Come, play games with us," Lucy's voice beckoned, though it had become frosty and layered with a sinister edge. The smile that crept on her face was unnatural, too wide, too sharp. "It's so much fun." I shook my head, scrambling backward against the quaking surface. "No, no, please." Before I could finish, the ground beneath me contracted violently, sucking me into a whirlpool of pulsating flesh and shadow. I screamed as I tumbled into an abyss of writhing limbs and hollow laughter. It felt like I was being engulfed by a monster that fed on fear, its belly churning and twisting around me. "Do you want to be a part of our story?" A voice hissed through the chaos, a sound tantalizingly familiar yet unbearably piercing. I knew this voice, and my heart sank. It was one of my childhood friends, Timmy, gone from the earth without a trace years ago. "You mustn't fight it. We can all be friends." Timmy. The very utterance of his name was a dagger to my heart. My mind raced, memories flooding back, the backyard adventures, the times we dared each other into the woods, his laughter ringing out like music. He was one of them, now another victim to this wretched existence. I can't stay here with you. It's not real." The children closed in around me, their laughter echoing eerily, a cacophony that frayed the edges of my mind. "Everything is real here," they sang, their voices intertwining like vines. "Even the games we play." Panic surged within me. I pushed through them, longing to escape the grasp of their tiny fingers. "What do you want from me?" "Join us," Lucy rasped, her expression shifting from playful to something colder, more predatory. "Become one of us. This is home. You'll never be alone again." Home. The word twisted in my stomach like barbed wire. I had once fought to protect my family, to bring Lucy back. Now, I was being beckoned to join a collective of lost souls, each depraved giggle echoing in the vastness like a spell cast over me. The shadows around us pulsed like a heartbeat, consuming everything in their hungry wake. And then, it happened. The darkness writhed, and from its depths emerged a figure cloaked in tattered black, its face obscured by a veil of swirling mist. It towered over us, whispering in an unsettling tone, "You have a choice to make." The voice chilled me to my core, ringing in my ears like an ancient incantation. What kind of choice? I managed to stammer, my voice barely rising above a whisper as the creature raised a skeletal finger, pointing at me with grotesque anticipation. Join the eternal game and be entwined with their essence, it beckoned, and the children howled in glee, their faces adorned with hollow expressions aspiring to that very fate. Or refuse, and face the consequences that will bring forth the realization of your darkest fears. A tremor shot through the ground, vibrating with a sinister intensity. I stood frozen, grappling with the enormity of what lay before me, a choice nestled among the ultimate horror, to dwell forevermore in this realm of wretched joy or to know a pain far beyond comprehension. Choose, the figure demanded, its voice a low rumble that coiled around me like velvet, suffocating any flicker of hope. The laughter of the children grew louder, blending with the whispers of things unseen, the weight of dread pressing upon my chest. The darkness spiraled around me, a tempest that threatened to consume not just my body but the very essence of who I was. As the walls of reality began to fragment, flickering between visions of the past and this twisted present, I felt the tether of my identity fraying. My decision hung in the air like an executioner's blade, and the ground beneath me quaked once more as I approached the edge of my humanity, teetering precariously between light and eternal dark. Then I heard it, the drumming of a heartbeat, echoing through the nightmarish void. It was frantic, pulsing, and it came closer. "Make your choice, or lose everything," the figure growled, its form shifting into something monstrous, and with desperation palpitating within me, I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. Just then, the darkness rippled like water disturbed by a rock thrown in, and through the swirling shadows, an unrecognizable figure lunged toward me, its hands outstretched. In that fleeting moment, as I realized it was not a child at all but an amalgamation of every fear I had ever known, I understood. My choice was already made, and the horror was just beginning. The frenzied chaos of shadowy limbs surged past me, a grotesque river of phantoms threatening to drown me in its depths. I turned, my heart hammering, yearning to escape the abyss that loomed behind me, yet the onslaught of laughter felt like chains pulling me deeper into the darkness. And then it struck, a horrifying realization that tore through the fractured fabric of my being. This wasn't just a realm of lost children, it was a manifestation of the very darkness lurking within me, the guilt and loneliness that haunted my past. I was tethered to it, shackled by the very emotions I had tried to bury. "Run!" yelled Timmy's voice, echoing out from the depth of the tumult. "Get out while you can." His face flickered in and out of existence, a ghostly reminder of the life I had known. But the children blocked every path as they drew closer, their eyes glinting with an unholy hunger for acceptance and a sinister mirth that stung my skin. "Why are you doing this?" I screamed, panic rising within me as their fingers brushed my arms, cold and clammy like the grave. "You're trapped here too." "Trapped?" Lucy mocked, her voice dripping with malice. "We're free. Don't you see? Here, we are limitless." My breath quickened. The shadows coiled, morphing into shapes my mind could scarcely comprehend. Without warning, they pulsed even more wildly, stretching forward in a wave that engulfed a small figure that had dared to stray too far from the group. The child reached out, wide-eyed in terror, before disappearing into the mass, their screams strangled by the fog of laughter. "Join us," the cloaked figure repeated, its tone thick with mirth and menace. "Let the shadows devour your fears." My chest tightened. The shadows sprang forth like tendrils, reaching for me. I darted left, narrowly avoiding their grasp. I could feel the weight of the grief and anguish swirling around me, clawing deeper into my psyche. Would I succumb to my own despair? Would I let it consume me, body and soul? "Don't fight it," a echoing chorus from the children rasped, their faces shifting grotesquely as if every moment spent within this void further warped their forms. "We can play forever." As their laughter rose to a deafening crescendo, I clutched my head, my mind racing. Thoughts of my family flooded my heart, their faces a mix of love and horror. I had to find a way out. Had to break the spell that bound me here. I remembered the stories my mother told me, the ones about how fear had a way of feeding into itself until there was nothing left. With a surge of defiance, I pressed my palms to my ears, whispering an incantation I had long forgotten but desperately wished to believe. I am not afraid. The ground trembled in response, and a fissure opened beneath me. I felt myself being pulled downward, the darkness of the void swirled faster, and just when I thought I had found a glimmer of escape, the figure loomed again, now stretching its twisted, elongated limbs towards me. Your will only binds you to this place, it hissed, the shadows cascading around it like a cloak, while the laughter of the children warped into cruel shrieks that reverberated through every fiber of my being. You cannot escape what you truly are. But then the heartbeat returned, swelling within the depths of the chasm. It pulsed, vibrating with an authority that felt alive, and I was drawn to it, a siren call in a sea of madness. I closed my eyes, focusing on the rhythm pulsing beneath the chaos. Run! Timmy's voice thundered again, a beacon of clarity amidst the encroaching gloom, jolting me from the grasp of despair. I opened my eyes, determined and resolute. I launched myself through the chaos, propelled by the clamoring heartbeats that resonated through the shadows. As I ran, the figures twisted and howled, but the beating grew louder, throbbing as the ground convulsed. I leaped over a dark chasm that seemed ready to swallow me whole, barely making it past the gaping maw of shadows, but then I turned back, just fleetingly, and there in the swirling void, I saw them. The children's faces twisted into monstrous visages, their eyes now reflecting something darker, a haunting despair, indistinguishable from malevolence. Let us play. They sang in a discordant harmony, their voices blending together, resonating with ancient secrets and buried secrets. Panic surged as a sudden thought struck me: they were not merely victims, they were the keepers of those secrets, bound to this realm of shadows. And with my heart racing, I realized that Timmy wasn't just a childhood friend, he was a gateway, a reminder of my own lost innocence. Just then, everything fell silent. The shadows paused, uneasy. The heartbeat stopped abruptly, and the very ground beneath me shifted violently, the pulse of the darkness now thundering with an unearthly hunger. And as the shadows spread around me, I realized I was no longer a mere participant in their deadly game, I had become the very quarry they craved. Now you are part of our story, the cloaked figure snarled, morphing into a form I could almost recognize, yet horrifyingly distorted, stretching the limits of reality. As terror gripped me like a vice, I stumbled backward, my foot teetering on the precipice, not just of the void but of my very soul. Just when I thought I could hold on to my last shred of lucidity, the ground beneath my feet crumbled away, plunging me into an even darker nightmare, and as I fell, a cacophony of laughter erupted around me, a symphony of horrified joy echoing into the depths of the abyss, a laughter that promised my greatest fears were only beginning to unfold. The sensation of falling stretched on indefinitely, my breath caught in a void, barely escaping my trembling lips. The darkness enveloped me, thick and cloying, pressing in like a weight of smothering despair. I fought against it, struggling to grasp at something, anything, to halt my descent, but there was nothing. Then, as the cacophony of laughter faded into a haunting echo, the world around me shifted abruptly. The ground solidified beneath me, and I landed hard on a floor that felt too familiar. With a sudden gasp, I realized I was in my childhood home, the air thick with memories both sweet and suffocating, faded wallpaper, its patterns peeling and curling, surrounded me like a protective yet oppressive embrace. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet like the tired bones of an ancient beast, shadows clustering in the corners of the dimly lit room. It was just as I remembered, but suffocated by an unsettling shroud of dread that I stumbled into the living room, where the old couch sagged under the weight of time and neglect. My mother's armchair faced the fireplace, where the embers no longer glowed, but instead flickered with a faint light that danced ominously, casting long shifting shadows. I could smell the familiar aroma of old books mixed with something acrid, a rancid decay that curled through the air like the laughter that lingered in my ears. Hello. My voice cracked, bouncing off the walls with an echo that eluded the quiet. The familiar space transformed, warping with every heartbeat, suffused with an oppressive aura. Timmy's warning echoed relentlessly in the recesses of my mind. Get out while you can. A cold breeze swept through the room, carrying with it whispers that conspired among themselves, snatching my attention and pulling me towards the kitchen. Shadows flitted past the doorway, moments of darkness that seemed to whisper secrets from my youth. The dining table was set, but instead of the warmth it once radiated, it felt like a trap I could feel eyes watching from the gloom. As I tentatively stepped toward it, the conversation crescendoed into a haunting chorus, words slipping through the veil of my comprehension. Stay with us forever, they beckoned, a blend of childish glee and hollow despair that I shook my head, desperate to hold on to my sanity. I don't want to play anymore, I cried, the protests of my fragile will dropping like stones into the abyss, splashing silence back in return. Then, the atmosphere thickened, forcing me to recoil as my breath quickened. From the corner of my eye, silhouettes flickered, gazes boring into my soul. I turned to see them, shadowy figures erupting from the woodwork, indistinct yet somehow familiar, their features sharp and grotesque, merging into forms half-remembered. Each face echoed a semblance of childhood innocence twisted into mockeries of glee. Lucy! Timmy! I screamed, searching their ghostly visages for any sign of recognition, longing for a flicker of humanity. What are you doing? But the laughter intensified, turning into a wheezing chortle, as the figures began to sway like marionettes, strings pulled by some unseen entity. We're waiting for you, they sang, the low, menacing cadence distorting the words until they became something truly dreadful. Suddenly, I felt it, a tug of longing twisting in my gut, deeper than fear, a desire to belong. Fists clenched, I stepped back, shaking my head violently. No. You're not real. You're just shadows. Shadows can be more real than you think, a voice rasped, slick and slithering, spidering up my spine. The cloaked figure emerged behind the ghastly assembly, its grotesque form twisting with pleasure, holding a mirror-like surface that reflected my distorted image back at me. You're lost between the worlds, trapped here with us, it hissed, eyes glowing with a predatory hunger that promised an eternity of torment. Embrace who you are, the darkness begs for your acceptance. My hands trembled, a battle raging within me, every memory of joy weighed against the stinging sharpness of pain. The laughter reached a fever pitch, fueling the shadows that swirled at my feet, climbing up my legs as if to bind me to the spot. I turned, looking for an escape, and when I saw it, a door at the far end of the hallway, a door that pulsed with an electric energy, its surface shimmering with a translucent shimmer that felt alive with possibility. Run! I screamed to myself, grabbing onto that fragment of courage. I sprinted toward the door, every step a battle against the hands of shadow that clawed for me. Just as I reached it, a chilling laughter enveloped me, resonating with a malicious intent that soaked through the very marrow of my bones. The door swung open, revealing a cavernous darkness behind it, deeper than I had ever known, pulling me toward its obsidian depths with a magnetic force. No! I shouted, only to find the voices stretching out, join us in the shadows. There's no going back. As I teetered on the precipice, caught between this world and the abyss, I took one last look back. The figures twisted, their faces melting into hideous grins as their voices merged into a singular chant. Your fears are just the beginning. And when the door slammed shut behind me, plunging me into the heart of the darkness, leaving me utterly alone, the laughter fading into an eternal whisper that promised nothing but despair. My heart raced. What awaited me on the other side? The darkness buzzed with life, and as I turned to face its malevolent depths, I realized I was no longer just on the brink, I had stepped into the maw of my own nightmares. The shadows welcomed me, shadows that were just a shade darker than my own heart, eager to consume. And then the whispers culminated into a singular question that sent shivers down my spine: are you ready to play? The moment I realized the door had closed behind me, a cold wave of panic washed over me. The shadows deepened, thickening around me like a sentient mist. The walls pulsed, contracting and expanding as if the house itself were breathing. I clutched my arms, trapping myself in an embrace, the remnants of warmth dissipating into the clammy air. "Are you ready to play?" The voice echoed again, its tone slithering beneath my skin, wrapping around my heart and squeezing tightly. I felt the sting of tears as despair clawed at my throat. My body urged me to flee, but every direction felt swallowed by pressing darkness. A cold energy crackled through the space, swirling around like a tempest. Shapes began to form in the depths, amalgamations of light and shadow. Fleeting impressions of my past lurched toward me, friends' faces warped into expressions of frenzied joy, laughter twisted into cries of desperation. Their eyes burned with a pleading intensity, bewildered by this transformation and crying out for help. "Lucy!" I shouted, desperation tangled with terror. "Timmy!" And then, through the haze of darkness, I felt a tugging at my consciousness, a siren call pulling me deeper into the suffocating embrace of the shadows. "Join us, we miss you, come play," they chanted softly, lulled into a hypnotic rhythm that stirred something deep within. The obstinate grip of fear loosened its hold as tendrils of warmth and nostalgia brushed against my mind. I teetered on the brink. Was it truly wrong to want to belong, to dissolve my fear in the comforting arms of companionship? With a resolute breath, I summoned all my strength. "Leave me alone. You're just figments, twisted relics of my past." I would not submit, I would not surrender to the seductive call of the darkness, but the shadows only laughed, their choral jeer weaving its way into my thoughts. "Relinquish your resistance, Lucy. You'll find solace in our embrace." The laughter surged, a cacophony that overwhelmed my senses, yet within it, unexpected threads of familiarity began to merge with the dread. I squeezed my eyes shut, remembering late-night stories told by my mother, adventures spun from whimsical dreams. This can't be real." "Real?" The voice snickered, a malevolence draping itself over the word. "What is real, if not the fear that exists within you? The fun we can have together will be unparalleled. Just a little more acceptance." The shadows quivered with delight, eager to swallow me whole. I fought back against the onslaught, memories flashing vividly, a bright sun on a field of daisies, laughter ringing through carefree days, sweetness that collapsed under the crushing weight of this malevolence. Drained and trembling, I pressed further into the darkness, clenching my fists in a desperate plea for clarity. "Timmy," I whispered, hoping to conjure a sliver of the boy I once knew. "Help me," and just then, a flicker danced across the abyss. A faint glimmer of luster emerged, tracing the outlines of a familiar figure, shrouded in shadows, yet radiating warmth. It was Timmy, but his face twisted in agony, his lips trying to form words that faltered before they could escape. "Lucy! You shouldn't be here!" he cried, anguish cracking his voice. "You have to do what they say or it'll get worse." The darkness, it's hungry. My heart twisted as the shadows tightened, drawing on Timmy's fear to fuel their energy. Desperation clawed at me. "What do I do?" I begged, my terror threatening to consume me. "You can't leave me like this. Fight!" he cried, but the darkness cut through his words, wrapping around his form, constricting him like a serpent. His image began to fade, losing its definition as the shadows encroached mercilessly. "No! Timmy!" I lunged toward him, but the oppressive void seized me, pulling me backward into the depths as I clawed at the void, desperately trying to reach him. As I was thrust away, the shadows boomed with laughter, a triumphant roar echoing in the cavernous space. "Don't worry, little Lucy. We'll keep him safe, for eternity." Their voice seethed with a sweet malice, filling my chest with. The icy grip of dread, the weight of hopelessness settled upon me as I staggered deeper into the cruel embrace of the darkness. My heart raced, urgency pounding in my ears. "No! This isn't happening." I gasped, echoing Timmy's words in my mind. The anguish blended with my relentless fight for survival, but the darkness whispered its sinister promise: "You cannot escape your fear. You belong to us now." As the shadows began to envelop me, wrapping tighter around my chest, I felt my footing falter. I was losing my grip on everything I knew, everything I was, and then, behind me, the door I had sprinted toward moments ago jerked open with a violent force. A blinding ray of light poured through the threshold, illuminating the shadows like a beacon ripping apart the terror that surrounded me. "Lucy!" Timmy's voice pierced through the cacophony, a desperate plea laced with frantic hope. Then, with blinding speed, the shadows tightened their grasp. "Choose, Lucy!" they boomed. "Stay with us, or step into the light." In that moment, my heart thudded against my ribcage. The choice hovered before me, an eternal paradox. Light and darkness, torment and solace. My mind raced, and before I could think, before I could choose, I stumbled toward the beckoning light, ready to break the shackles of despair. But as I took that step, a bone-chilling scream echoed from the depths of the darkness. My scream, twisted into something horrific. And as the light enveloped me, something colder than the shadows held onto my soul, and the whisper came again, now sharper, clearer: "You cannot run from what you truly are." Everything went white, a blinding flash of terror, and then silence. The blinding light faded as swiftly as it had appeared, cascading into a veil of oppressive darkness. My heartbeat surged in my ears, replacing the whispers of the abyss with a deep, hollow thrum. I stood alone in an unfamiliar room, the air thick and stale, stinging my lungs like vinegar. The light that had offered me hope flickered and died, leaving me adrift in an ocean of despair. That I blinked rapidly, desperately trying to focus, but shadows played tricks on the periphery. My heart sank when I recognized the grotesque familiarity of my own home, my once safe sanctuary transformed into a nightmare. The walls pulsed as if alive, breath fogging the air in a grotesque mimicry of warmth. "Welcome back, Lucy," the voice purred, curling around me like smoke. Fear twisted in my gut. "Did you think you could escape? Show yourself!" I cried out, rage fueling my defiance. But in that moment, the shadows thrummed with amusement, billowing forth to form familiar shapes. A slumped figure crouched in the corner, the haunting silhouette of my brother, once vibrant and joyful, now a shadow of terror. "Timmy?" I stammered, inching backward into the corner of the room, trying to find safety within my own confinement. His face twisted grotesquely, where laughter once danced in his eyes was now an empty void, a yawning chasm promising inexorable doom. "You shouldn't have come back," he moaned, his voice echoing like a distant memory. "It was easier before. We had fun, but now." "Fun?" I barked, incredulous. "This isn't fun, Timmy. You're trapped in here, too, just like me." He quivered, the shadows melding into him and out of him, a shifting mirage of his former self. "I'm not trapped, not anymore. I chose them. You can, too, if you just listen." His voice slithered into my mind, teasing apart my resolve as the sinister tendrils of darkness edged closer. Behind him, I sensed movement, features emerging from the shadows. A girl with broken glass for eyes, a boy whose skin shimmered with decay, faces I could only half recognize twisting in their revelry as they beckoned with chilling smiles. "Join us, Lucy," they sang in a symphony of fractured voices, blending delight with despair. "We can be whole again. No more pain, only play." The words sank into my bones, stirring a deep-seated yearning I had forgotten, and I found myself hesitating, heart racing. A dark vision of burning flowers and laughter flooded my mind, the remnants of innocence shattered in this hellish playroom. "No. I want tea," I screamed, breaking free from the grasp of nostalgia. But it was futile. The shadows swarmed around me, their caress both soothing and suffocating, and I knew there was no exit, not now. The once whispering walls surged closer, encasing me in a shrine of horrors. A shriek exploded from within as a mass of writhing forms slashed at the air. My childhood toys burst from the shadows, but they were no longer innocent, they bore grotesque visages, their cruel smiles mocking the remnants of my youth. "Remember us?" a broken doll asked, its porcelain face shattered and leaking ichor. "We were friends once, Lucy. Why not come play?" Adrenaline electrified my veins. "You're not real." I gritted my teeth, pushing them away, but they lunged with fierce hunger, trying to consume my sanity, trying to coax me into a world of broken dreams. Just then, a thundering crash echoed from the door, rattling the walls. "Lucy, don't listen to them!" Timmy shouted, his voice strained and desperate against the rising tide of malicious laughter. The air thickened, and the shadows spat rage, but flickers of light altered the air, smothering their power momentarily. "Leave her alone." A new voice surged in, something fierce and unyielding, rising against the shadows like a beacon. In the dim light emerging from the door, a figure staggered forward. My heart filled with recognition, but it quickly turned to ice as the light revealed not kindness but a form broken and twisted, chanting a hymn of madness. "Mom!" A figure that should have been familiar stood before me, face fractured with darkness and despair. Her mouth jerked open, the words gurgling and slithering out. "Lucy, come home, stay with us. It's safe here, sweet girl," she coaxed, the voice serrated at the edges, warped and tainted by something insatiable that thrived in the shadows. "Run! Get away!" Timmy yelled, but I was rooted in place, caught in the vice grip of horror as the figure that looked like my mother approached, tendrils of darkness curling off her like haunting smoke. The shadows surged, threatening to envelop me entirely, the familiarity of my mother now a twisted echo in my mind, resonating with threats and promises, sweet, sweet promises. "Join us in the dark, Lucy. You can have everything you wish for." And with each step she took, the darkness swirled, tightening its hold, mother and her apologies weaving around me like a noose. My heart pounded, battling against the impending engulfment. "Lucy, you have no choice." Just as I thought I could resist no longer, the laughter shattered into a deafening cacophony, fading into a screeching rush. The shadows closed in, and the light flickered, stabbing through the veil for one last glimmer. And then everything went dark again, swallowed whole by an abyssal nothingness that pulsed to life beneath my feet. What I thought I had escaped was now a tormenting embrace pulling me down, deeper, as the icy whisper enveloped my mind once more, "There is no escape from what you are." And then, in the crushing silence, I felt the presence of countless eyes watching, waiting, and my own voice rose in a chilling scream that echoed indefinitely into the void. The echo of my scream lingered in the suffocating darkness, a hollow cry swallowed by the weight of despair. An oppressive stillness followed, thick as syrup, waiting, watching. I gasped for breath, trying to calm the panic clawing at my chest. As I stood bewildered, trying to center myself amid the swirling shadows, I realized I was no longer alone. An unfamiliar scent seized my senses, something rancid, like decayed meat and burnt sugar twisted together in a grotesque blend. The air shimmered, faintly fluorescent remnants leaking into the void, illuminating horrific scenes of past horrors etched in ghostly light. I stumbled backward as they flickered before me, glimpses of broken memories, lost laughter echoing through creaking floorboards, images of strained family dinners where warmth hung like a noose around our collective necks. Suddenly, a chilling laughter erupted, but it wasn't just any laughter. It was a chorus of my own, a sound that melded with the others, twisting and distorting until it felt monstrous. Faces materialized from the shadows, twisted parodies of my life, friends I'd long forgotten. Each wore expressions laden with anguish, mouths moving in a choreographed assault that drowned out my own thoughts. "Lucy, don't you remember us?" They chimed, their voices a symphony of taunts and tenderness, foam-tipped barbs of nostalgia piercing through my defenses. It felt as if the very foundation of my mind was cracking under the weight of their insistence that I fought to clear my thoughts, echoing Timmy's desperate warnings. "They're lying. They want to use you." My voice wavered, flaking paint off walls of sanity. I stumbled forward, seeking any semblance of a way out, only to find more shadows twisting before me, mocking in their playfulness a spectral playground where innocence was lost in cursed laughter. "Join us. You're one of us now," they called, and instinctively, I clutched my head, desperate to silence their clamor. But each sound surged within me like a tide, washing away reason and rationale, where every memory felt less like my own and more like an echo trapped in its never-ending loop. Just then, I felt a tangible chill prickling down my spine, the sensation of a gaze that wasn't just watching but burrowing deep into my soul. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach as the air thickened with foreboding. Standing behind me, illuminated faintly by that flickering light, was another figure, smaller, swathed in shadows, features cloaked in the same aura of darkness that enveloped everything else. It stepped forward hesitantly, like a moth drawn to the dying glow. When the light caught it just right, a horrid recognition churned in my gut. "No, it can't be," I whispered, backing away, but it followed. The familiar shape, the little girl with the porcelain skin and hollow, gaping eyes, moved closer, each step weighed down by memories heavy as stones. "Lucy, I missed you." Her voice was a mere whisper, cutting through the chaos, soft yet laced with a sinister undertone that made the hairs on my neck stand upright. "I found them. They said you'd come for me, they promised." Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to turn my back on the remnant of innocence that she embodied, to escape what I knew she would become in their grueling grip. "Go away. Please, go." I pleaded, but the shadows hovered, roaring with life, their fervor intensifying, suffocating me in this circus of lost souls. "Stay with us. Stay forever." The chorus of my friends cried, their voices merging into a din that drowned out even my racing thoughts, a storm of emotions, fear mingled with longing gnawing at me from within. The darkness congealed around the girl, snapping at my heels, tangling my legs, and snaring me in its desperate embrace. My heart pounded wildly, a frantic drum calling for escape. But even as I realized I was slipping further from the last vestiges of light, I felt a flicker of hope within my chest, a buried piece of strength that had somehow survived. "Timmy! Timmy!" I called out into the spiraling void, searching desperately for his voice, my lifeline in an ocean of madness. "I'm here. Help me." The laughter faltered, just for a moment. A silence fell over the room like a blanket, heavy and suffocating. "Please, I don't want to be like you," I cried out, my knees buckling as I succumbed to despair, staring wide-eyed at the empty doorway, yearning for a glimmer of salvation. Then, in a split second, the ground beneath me trembled violently, and a rush of wind surged into the room. The familiar voices screamed in unison, the echoes driving spikes of ice through my heart, their pleas only intensifying the dread coiling inside me. A shadow, darker than the room itself, shot forward with sickening speed, a predatory vitality that sent shivers racing up my spine. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. "Lucy, come home," whispers wrapped around me like a net, pulling tighter and tighter, distorting reality until the room began to shake, cracks of light flickering in and out of view, slivers of something unspeakable lurking just beyond the veil. And then, amidst the chaos, I felt something profound shift, roots of darkness reaching inward, pulling at my deepest fears, a terrifying revelation dawning in the pit of my stomach as I realized, this home wasn't just a prison, it was alive. And then, as the walls buckled and the laughter turned to a symphony of despair, I felt a warm breath brush against my ear, a soft voice saying with sinister sweetness, "We're going to play a game." Then, everything shattered into a kaleidoscope of blinding white light, and I was plunged into an endless abyss as laughter flared into an agonizing scream, now distinctly my own, echoing into the infinite. I awakened once more, not as Lucy, not as the child I had once been, but trapped in an entity I could not recognize. The darkness hummed around me, throbbing with a life of its own, as if the very foundation of existence conspired against me. I blinked against the shimmering void, where shadows morphed and twisted, coiling around each layer of my sanity until I could sense the ages of grief and abandonment layered within their essence. "Time to play," whispered a voice that slithered beneath the surface of my understanding, the essence of my fears woven into its fabric. They pulsated with an insatiable hunger, whispering secrets that clawed at the edges of my mind. There was no escaping them, I was bound to this existence now. The memories of laughter, the lightness of ease became a heavy shroud that concealed something far darker, a sickness that spread from the shadows to the core of who I had become. My own memories betrayed me, twisting the joyful hues of childhood into suffocating darkness. As I floated in that suffocating void, echoes of laughter rumbled throughout, merging into a mirror of maddening sounds, my friends' voices becoming indistinguishable from the cacophony. "Join us, Lucy," they urged, as a flicker of movement caught my eye. Shadows danced through the darkness, circles tightening around me. Each figure, the distorted remnants of my childhood family, wore smiles that warped with malignance, reminding me of soured nostalgia. Their eyes glimmered with madness, an unwavering compulsion to drag me deeper into their realm. No! I screamed, a sound swallowed by the suffocating air, sharp as glass and just as painful. I felt my heart beat against the thick shell that encased my being, a desperate pulse fighting against an inevitable fate. But the shadows drew nearer, enticed by my fear, the allure of a game that promised connection while it plotted my destruction. "Come play with us, forever," they sang, their voices an invitation that dripped with malice and treachery, tugging at the remnants of my lost innocence. I could almost see the glimmer of their previous forms, familiar faces somehow lost to darkness. "We can keep you safe, Lucy," whispered the voice of my mother, deceptive softness hiding malevolence beneath. Only it wasn't her voice but a cruel mimicry, a fusion of echoes that felt both tender and threatening. "Home isn't a safe place, not anymore," I murmured, my breath hitching as the weight of reality pressed upon me like an anchor dragging me down. The voices shrieked in laughter, resonating through the inferno of despair. "But we are always here. We'll never leave." In that moment, the shadows surged forward, crashing into me like a tidal wave, wrapping around my essence, pulling me with unrelenting force into their whirlpool, and then I caught a vision shimmering like the flicker of a flame of myself standing before a mirror. Only, it was no ordinary mirror, it fragmented reality into a kaleidoscope of horrifying truths, reflecting not just my fears but the darkest impulses that took root within. I had spent years trying to outrun them, but the very act of running had only fed their insatiable appetites. "Look closer," came the voice, dripping with eerie sweetness, drawing me deeper into my own reflection, as the figure in the mirror grinned with savage delight. I recognized that laugh, my own, distorted and vicious, spilling forth from the dark recesses I had tried to bury. "You cannot escape what you are," it taunted, each word laced with venom, twisting and warping the air between us. Desperation clawed as I tore myself away from that horrid reflection. I was not just facing my fears, I was standing at the precipice of something far more terrifying, the truth that I had become the dark entity I had feared all along. The laughter, the whispers, they were not merely the lost children, they were the shadows of my past, my secrets, and this place was the repository of everything I had tried to bury. Then it came crashing into focus like a nightmare unfurling with clarity. I was the instigator, my grief and despair had given birth to this horror. "No!" I gasped, choking on the realization. "This is not who I am." But the laughter escalated, drowning out my cries as the shadows pressed closer, compressing my thoughts into the tight stranglehold of darkness. I could feel it seep into my very being, amalgamating my essence with the pitiful cries of those trapped with me. I had unwittingly fostered the very demons I feared. "Do you want to play a new game?" the figure in the mirror asked, lips stretching wider until they fractured into a vision of shattered teeth. Each grin harbored an echoing promise of new terrors waiting just beneath the surface. "No!" I screamed again, but the more I fought, the more the darkness tightened its grip. Bursts of laughter echoed through the shadows, each fragment caught my memories, distorted and twisted, carving deeper grooves of horror within my mind. Then I caught sight of Timmy lost within the swirling nightmare, eyes wide with vulnerability. "Help!" he cried, but his spectral image was slowly wilting, consumed by the shadows. "Join us, Lucy." They beckoned again, the masquerade complete. "Playtime never ends." "No," I whispered, the pleading trembling in my voice giving way to a quiet realization. Sometimes, to save others, you must first conquer yourself. To break free, I needed to embrace the truth. I had to tap into the raw essence of what remained of my own humanity buried deep beneath the layers of darkness. "Enough!" I shouted, summoning every last fragment of defiance. The shadows surged towards me, emboldened by my despair, eager to snuff out what light remained. But in that moment, I recalled all the laughter of those who had loved and nurtured me, and I drew upon that strength. My will ignited like a dormant ember bursting into flame. "You cannot have me." With that declaration, the shadows recoiled as if struck. The ground beneath me shook, a shock wave of light spilling forth, shattering the mirror until pieces fell like jagged stars around me. "This is my story," I roared, heart racing as the shards danced in the air, glinting with a vibrancy I had long forgotten. Realization blossomed within me, a connection forged not in fear but in love. I had to save them by saving myself. I turned back to Timmy, who lingered on the edge, fear and hope intertwining in his warped visage. "We can take back our lives," I hollered, my faith igniting something raw and powerful. "Let go of your control," I cried to the shadows. "Embrace the light." And with that, I reached out to embrace Timmy's fading presence. A deep bond tethered us, drawing us back from the brink together, anchoring my soul to him, to the innocence we once shared even amidst the darkness. The shadows trembled, their laughter faltering into screams of rage as the light expanded, swallowing their laughter whole. In a blinding flash, we surged forward, shimmering shards piercing through the suffocating cocoon that had almost consumed us. I could feel their essence unravel, the distorted whispers fading into nothingness. Together, Timmy and I broke the chains, a visceral force of riotous purity surging forward, and I watched as the darkness collapsed in on itself, unraveling its form with a shattering echo. The void broke apart in a blinding explosion of light, and suddenly, we were free, weightless, cast into a familiar air. The echoes of laughter and the sorrowful cries transformed into melodies bathing in golden light, and for a moment, I thought it was over. I felt their warmth, the sensation of home wrapping around me like a tender embrace. But then the voices lingered, even as I began to emerge. A haunting chuckle that echoed from beneath, like a groaning door that never truly closed. "Are you ready to play again?" It whispered into my thoughts, chilling me to the bone as I collapsed into darkness, watching the light twist into a familiar darkness that promised to beckon me back. In this game, being free never meant being safe. As I thought about the faces of my companions, I realized that I was still in their story, still intertwined with shadows that would haunt me forever. And just before the laughter enveloped me again, I knew one thing for certain: the dark would always be waiting.